Big thank you to the whole team of Passive House Accelerators. But as well, I want to say a big thank you to all my former students and everybody that helped me to put this together. The last months I've spent my time on finding out what is actually happening. Why are everybody saying why Passive House is more expensive and where we at actually? And this work that I put here together is over like hundreds of hours of myself and other people out there. And I see a lot of Australian fellas down there. They're looking from down up to you. Change comes from bottom up. That's what we're doing from Australia. So that's what's happening here. So thank you for your feedback. Thank you for the information that you provided me. And I looked at so much data over the last months. I looked at Australian statistics like cost developments over the last 20 years, like of energy costs, then housing, household expenditures, what has been happening over the last 20+ years, and mortgage costs. So I looked at all that stuff and I tried to put it together. Then this big discussion started, like $2,500 per square meter. For you guys that are speaking in feet, that are still using body parts for measurements, just ditch one digit. So out of that 2,500, you make 250, then you have your feet cost. Yeah, that's how much the feet cost. So 2,500 was this big discussion in the current market. It's not possible, but Simone, I don't know if she's here today. She has one project with 2,550 in the making right now, and one for 2,600. I got feedback of people that are doing their own house for $1,150 a square meter, so $115 a square foot. Yeah, for you guys in the US. And I got so many other costs of 1,850, a few in them, like 3 or 4, and then a lot of square meter prices of $2,200 or lower. So 2,500 is a really realistic figure, even in the current market, if we're making the right design decisions. And that's what we're discussing today. Then as well, we have to be super careful not to mix up additional features with passive house costs. Yeah, it's a big one that is done the whole time. We don't want to mix that up. The presentation together, because I got always this information: passive house is so expensive, passive house is so expensive. But is it really that expensive? And what if passive house is not costing more? What if we can actually show that passive house is not costing more, and what would we have to do that is not costing us more? So yeah, like before I said, I'm Daniel Kress, and I want to present now my presentation on does passive house cost the world? As a little bit an introduction of what we're going through. First, I got a little introduction of me and my company. Then we speak shortly about our current situation. Then we go into passive house. What is passive house? Shortly, then the passive house economics, the passive house project costs, and then does passive house limited design, and then conclusions. Today, we can only really talk about the conclusions. I can't really give you the information of how I came to that information because we have only half an hour, and I want to show you how we can actually make the figures work instead of where the figures are coming from. Generally speaking, my informations are normally seen as information overload. So it may feel, like I already said earlier, taking a drink from a fire hose. Yeah. For people that want to know more about it and want to get more details, there is an article coming out in Build It, page 2021 next week. In that magazine, you have an article of this explained in words. And as well, on the 13th of April, I'm doing a passive house in Australia, is it too expensive webinar, where I'm going into more details where the numbers come from. Yeah, so that's as a little information. That little QR code there is the link. This slide comes at the end again. So if you think, oh, I want to know more, it's coming again. So good introduction. Like before, I'm Daniel Kress. I started my career in Germany as a carpenter, building eco homes. Then I moved to Ireland, building eco, realized that eco is not sustainable. And then I moved, and then I really looked into sustainable building solutions. Soon I realized that sustainable is not necessarily healthy, and I really dive deep into the passive house world. Then after all this, realizing already that sustainable is not necessarily healthy, I then went to study at Hochschule Karlsruhe in Germany, civil engineering, specializing in building physics and chemistry, and then a Master of Engineering in Canada, where I went into the building science. And then I've done this this EU project comparing building standards to Passive House, and conclusion, Passive House is providing the best results. So it's nothing new, we know that. So Smart Plus is our mission is making our world a better place. We want to empower people to make a difference. That's what we really stand for. What we do is we are on a mission to decarbonize the building industry. So it's not just Passive House, we are thinking bigger. And how we do it, we inspire and lead with passion and love. That's what we do. So our vision, what we're able to do already is building shelters, structural sound, and protecting us from the elements. That's what we're doing right now. But what we really need to address is the healthy indoor air, that's Passive House, comfortable indoor environment, Passive House, sustainable buildings, Passive House, and economical. This is what Passive House is bringing together, and this is why Passive House is the first step. This is not the final end game. This is just the first step. In my opinion, Passive House standard is the lowest standard we should be building to. Yeah, we can't build worse than that. Everything else is not acceptable. So next one, we have to go into energy producer, energy storage, zero energy building, and then real zero energy building. So from the beginning, from cradle to cradle, really that point of view. Then we want to have smart buildings plus energy buildings, so that they're becoming the power stations of the future. And then we're coming to the smart plus buildings. Yeah, that's where we want to go. So current situation. I think people going to the petrol station these days, or gas station for you in the US, are thinking, what the hell is happening here? You may want to consider a few things. Who would like to own a car that needs 10 times less petrol these days? Put a 1 into the chat if you would like to have a car that needs a 1/10 of the energy. Just put into the chat a 1, and then we know we would like to have that. So that's a nice way of interacting with each other. So instead of 10 liters, it's 1 liter on 100 kilometers. And who would be willing to spend, instead of $30,000, $33,000? Who would be willing to do that? Put a 2 into the chat for that one. Yeah. So would you still be willing to spend this $3,000 if it's instead of 10 liters, 5 liters? Please put in a 3 into the chat. Yeah, would you spend still, if it's just cutting your petrol cost by half, an additional 30,000 in your upfront investment? This is exactly what Passive House is offering you. Yeah, Passive House is cutting reduces the conditioning cost by 90%, so it ditches a digit, and that is all for an additional investment of 10%. $3,000 or 30,000 is 10%. That's what Passive House is giving us. If you're looking to the whole domestic fuel consumption, it cuts it to half, and that's that 5 liter to 10 liters, that 10 liters to 5 liters. So this is what Passive House is giving us. Cars are the second biggest investment of our lifetime. The biggest investment of our lifetime is normally our home. Yeah, so buying a building, a house is a major financial investment. It's normally the biggest one of investment of a lifetime for our clients. It's the biggest ongoing costs for the mortgage, fixed. For the running costs, highly fluctuating, what we painfully have to realize these days on the petrol station, and as well with our heating and cooling bill. In the UK, the heating bills went up by 500%, just as a little information in the background. This is the reason why we really have to look to the budget and the value of the investment that we're actually putting together. Passive House, the reason I'm putting Passive House in there is a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people always argue Passive House is not economical. Passive House is not economical. It's far too expensive. But when we look to the history of Passive House, we actually know that Passive House comes from an economical side. Like Wolfgang Feist wasn't a rich guy. He didn't have that money to spend. Yeah, like he really had to find that money. And he looked at the situation that we had in the 80s. And he realized that 1/3 of the non-renewable energy consumed is from conditioning our houses. 1/3 of the energy consumed was non-renewable energy. And that's conditioning, so we can address that. This is the reason why he built his first passive house with 4 units in 1991. And the additional investment, if you translate it, it was $67,000 for each unit. And these 3 families, he had no, like he didn't know these people. There wasn't a friendship. It was people that said, yeah, we're taking that risk. We're believing in your craziness, that this actually works. Yeah, so it needed to be affordable from day one. And the idea of affordability has been in the Passive House standard from day one. Back in the day, there were no triple glazings out there. There was they didn't know if the thermal insulation works, and heat recovery ventilation systems as we have them today were not existing either. If you want to read a little bit more about it and how he was already giving us information, or like already saying that with Russia, how dangerous it is, here the Passive House blog with a link to that interview where I'm referring to. Then next one, efficiency first. How much tea lights would we need for a 15 square meter room? Put it into the chat. How many tea lights? 15 square meters is 150 square foot. Yeah, so 15 square meter bedroom. How many tea lights? Put it into the chat. How many tea lights you think it is? 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 2, 10. Yeah, 1, 5, 15.0. 1.5. It's 5 tea lights. So it's normally 3 tea lights per square meter. Yeah, so that's good to know. Every 3 tea lights per square meter. So 10 square foot is 3 tea lights. So 1 tea light every 3 square foot, 3.5 square foot, something like that. Yeah, so the most sustainable energy is the one not used. Keep that in mind. And that's what we're doing. And it's very important is to remember, despite the location or climate, Passive House is defined for the consumption of the building. And this is not climate dependent. In any climate, if you're building in Alaska or you're building in Texas, it's the same energy consumption. Yeah, we're designing the building to it. So let us be a bit smarter than NASA. Like NASA had this Mars climate orbiter. And they had this problem that they did this little mistake of metric to imperial. Yeah, and they lost 328 million US dollars back in the day. Yeah, so mission failure because of not translating the numbers properly. So let us look at that a little bit. One square meter, like I said already, is about 10 square foot. We just need to multiply it by 10. Square foot sounds for me more like a condition than a measurement, but it's what you're using. So you need to multiply by 10 from a square meter. And when we speak about dollars per square meter, if you want to know per square foot, you need to divide by 10. Yeah, and this signs will come up again and again. So this is a square meter, $10. And now when we look at a square meter, and how many foot are in there? There's 10 square foot in there, and every foot is $1. Yeah, so I try to make it visual for you guys to understand this relation between foot and like metric and imperial. And we mainly talk about only square meterage and dollars, and that's the reason why these numbers work that way. So here, Passive House is from tiny for high rise. So we can build passive houses from 30 square meters to 18,426 square meters, no problem. So now you need to multiply by 10. So it's 184,000 square foot. And that is where Passive House is possible. Passive House is as well possible for cities. So we have this in Heidelberg, in Germany, but as well China with these massive offices. China, 1.2 million square meters, so that's 12 million square foot. And in Germany, it's more than 100,000 square meters. Good. Passive house is comfort with clear conscience. Yeah, so passive houses are normal buildings just built better. The additional cost is $250 to $750 per square meter. So that would be $25 to $75 per square foot, to give you that idea. This is equivalent to an additional cost of 5 to 20% in residential. In commercial, it is often as little as 1%. So that was just a little introduction to the whole thing. So let us start with the economics. So passive house is economical. So the additional investment is 0 to 20%. In low quality buildings, it's rather 20%. In high end buildings, it's rather 1%. Usually $200 to $750 per square meter, like we just said already, and that put into figures. If you're having a square meter rate of $250 on my project that I will look at later with $384 per square meter, it's 15%. Medium quality 5,000, 8%. High quality 5%. So the additional cost will stay the same for the same building, but the finishes are different. The detailing is different, and that is not additional passive house cost, and that's the reason why the percentage goes down, but the dollars per square meter stays the same. So it's passive house is the lowest hanging fruit with the smallest green premium. It's even a negative in the long run because we're getting a return of investment. That means it's negative green premium. So this is the project that we are looking at. It's a 125 square meter building, so 1,250 square foot, 3 bedrooms, 23 square meter of windows. The additional investment for the passive house is $48,000. That's like 21 for the design part, 24,000 for the thermal envelope, and 6,000 for the building services. The windows were less than $10,000. Less than $10,000 for the whole building glazed. 4 years ago, I wouldn't even got I just get a double slider window for that. Now I'm getting the whole building glazed for that. So that pricing is going down, 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 down. This comes to a square meter rate of $384 in this project. Passive house savings. So what do we save? We save energy of $1,396 in the first year. And then we are expecting a cost rise of our energy costs by 4.7%. That's the same that we had from 2003 to 2016. The newest data is not available after 2016, so that should come out end of this year. And then passive house additional cost is $48,000. And obviously that's an additional investment. So a loan is required of $48,000, and we are expecting an interest rate of 5%. Currently, the interest rate is between 2 and 5%. So I'm going against passive house. So I'm saying it's expensive to loan money, the highest expenses. Then to be clear, we are comparing here a poorly conditioned house with a temperature swing from 10 degrees to 32 degrees to a passive house that is always between 20 and 25 degrees. Yeah, so this is important to know that we're comparing it to that. We are applying no real interest rate. So we are applying the actual interest rate. In other words, this 4.7 with the inflation we're having right now of 3.25% in Australia, it would be always a real interest rate of 1.45% upfront. So let us now come to what are the findings. If you're comparing a passive house to a conventional house, and we're only looking at the running costs, we're saving $266,000 over 50 years. This is like comparing a passive house to a conventional house in the building costs. Obviously, passive house is clearly winning here. If you're looking to the building cost, the passive house costs $48,000 more. However, that $48,000 to the $266,000 is not, we can't compare them directly. We need to put them into a relation. Like $266,000 today is not $266,000 in 50 years. Having money in your pocket or know you're getting paid in the future is something different, right? Yeah, if you're having money in your pocket, you can pay for your food, but if you run out of money before the month is over, you can't pay for your food. That's the reason why we can't really compare them. So let us put them into the equation like we learned it in the Passive House Designer course. The 4.7% of energy price increase. The yellow line is just the energy costs of a passive house. The green line is including, the green columns is including the loan for 30 years. This is the reason why having this massive jump in the 31st year. From 30 to 31st, there's this massive jump because the loan is paid off. Yeah, and this is what it shows us in at the beginning, passive house is costing us more. And then we're coming to the equilibrium at the year 19. And then after 30 years, the loan is paid off and now it drops down. And now we see this big savings of passive house already. So when we put that now into a little bit of figures, in the first year, we spent $1,725 more in a year in a passive house. In the 19th year, the financial burden becomes a financial freedom. In the year 31, we're having already $5,538 more in our pocket. And in the year 50, it's $13,000 more in our pocket. Cash versus profit. Do you rather have cash or profit, guys? One for cash, two for profit. Who when you're running, who here is running a profitable business, but still has a problem with cash flow? So only cash can be spent. We can have a profitable business, but if you don't have the cash, then it doesn't work. So this is the reason we will look more at the cash later on than at the profit. But if you look at the profit side of a passive house, in this example, the profit is in that year 31. That's the first time when we really have everything paid off and we have a return of investment in 31 before we don't have a return of investment. So that's important to know. In this example, it's 30 years, comparing a conventional house to a passive house with the same sales value. So if you're selling the passive house and the conventional house and they're both for sale and you're getting exactly the same money for that project. Yeah, so again, totally against passive house. But then obviously after that 50 years, we're already having a massive bonus, even if you're looking at the cumulative result. If you're looking at cash basis, that's the financial burden that you experience in the year 1, in the year 2, and year 3. Then we're coming to this. In the first year, the additional daily financial burden is a coffee a day, $4.73. It's $2.70 in the 10th years. In the 19th year, we come to the financial freedom. And in the year 31, we're having a free lunch every single day. Yeah, so this is the costs. If we're having an annual energy cost increase of 4.7%, but you may now say, yeah, 4.7%, what is happening when the energy increase is more? No, it's less. Like if we have less energy increase, so against passive house, then we're coming to this. It's still a coffee a day in the first year. Yeah, and in the 10th year, it's $3.67. So it's now not as good any longer, and instead of $15 we're only having $8.51 in the 31st year. But the highest financial burden is still a coffee a day. The same is happening if the energy prices are going up more extreme than they're going up right now. It's still a coffee a day in the first year, but now we're having $26 in the 31st year, and if it's even going more up, then we're having $34 in $34 more in the pocket in the year 31. Good. So the additional investment for passive house is a coffee a day, like I just said already. For a coffee a day, reduction of a coffee a day, you get a healthy building that's sustainable and gives you financial freedom. Now I want to show you another side of the curve, or like another perspective, impact of incentives. So the reason I'm doing that, I hope we have already politicians in this webinar, because incentives really matter. We're having here Bank Australia. They're giving us a discounted interest rate of 0.2% if you're building passive house. So what happens if you're doing this? So if you're having, instead of a 5% interest rate, a 4.8% interest rate, and comparing that now to each other, Now we're coming to that situation that in the first financial year, the $4.73 becomes a $3.46 as a financial burden. In the year 10, the $2.77 is only a $1.50 per day. And then in the year 31, when it is already profitable, it's still the $15. It hasn't changed. If now the government is, instead of giving out a first buyer's loan for nothing, giving first buyer loan incentives in a percentage of interest rates out of a 0.3%, yeah, 2% by the bank, 0.2% by the bank, 0.3% by the government, and we still talk about the $2,500 square meter rate, then it goes down to $1.59 in the first year. And in the second year, it goes down to 37 cents. And then in the 15th year, it's still the $15 more. In the case we're not spending $2,500 on the square meter, we're spending $4,000 in the on the square meter. So high quality buildings. Now we're coming, or like higher quality buildings. Now we're coming to a plus already in the first year. So the passive house is already creating a return of investment from the year one, just because of an incentive by the government of 0.3%. Yeah, if you're now looking at the 10th year, it's $2.25, and in the 31st year, it's still that $15. So in other words, with this incentive, with this government incentive, we could really help people to make that move and making life easier during the loan period, because otherwise it anyway pays. Yeah. So now, does Passive House limit design? Who knows that building? Yeah, so design limitation by Passive House. Nope, there's no design limitation because of Passive House. Passive House does not limit the design. I'm claiming that I can build Sagrada Familia as a Passive House, maybe not in my lifetime, but Gaudio didn't do that either. It's always a question of budget. It's always a question of budget and not of Passive House design. We just need better components to achieve it. Studies show that Passive House can cost up to 20% more. However, architectural features regularly exceed the 30% of building costs. That's your glazed handrails. That's your stainless steel finish here, your shadow gap there. All that things adding costs to the build. This is not Passive House. This is architectural features, and we have to keep them separate. Passive House does not need to be expensive. How big is big enough? One thing that we need to keep in mind, and I want to have it in there just as a reminder for us, Passive House says 30 square meter per person. Learning from tiny house movement, we could achieve that easily, I would say. Smart and good design is giving us that results. In Australia and the US, where we have the biggest houses in the world, Australia here and Canada here, US here, then I think a good compromise might be 50 square meters, so 500 square foot per person might be a good compromise instead of 80 plus square meters per person. So now let us go back to the impact of size, shape, and compactness. The significance of size, shape, and compactness is not understood. This is the reason I want to really show it on that spa home. This freestanding this freestanding two-story build with 125 square meter, 1,250 square foot, has a thermal envelope of 351 square meter. The use factor is now the thermal envelope square meterage divided by the 125 treated conditioned space, 2.81, is an additional Passive House cost of $48,000. And that's now a two-story freestanding building. So if you're now going to building long single-story build, so we put the first story and the second story behind each other. The wide single-story build, we're putting them next to each other, or we're looking at a mid-terraced house. What impact does that have? We're having here now our situation. So our conditioned space is 125 square meter. For the long single-story building, the price goes up from $48,000 to $64,000. Yeah, the wide single-story build, it goes up to $59,000. In the mid-terraced house, it goes down to $26,000 additional costs. Here, we need to see the thermal envelope. The thermal envelope is here 510 square meter. It is here 473 square meter, and here it's only 250 square meter. So these square meterages need to perform, they let exactly the same amount of energy through that 500 square meter, that 470 square meter, and that 250 square meter. They're letting the same amount of energy through as a total, because it's the same building behind that walls, behind that roof, behind that slab. This means my 500 square meter building needs to let only half of the energy through per square meter than my 250 square meters. Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, I need twice as much wall that performs as twice as good. I not only need more wall, I need to build the wall better because of my compactness. And this is where the cost effectiveness comes in play if you're not building compact. Yeah, so working with surfaces, not with shapes. I keep saying it over and over again. Yes, we can just build an ugly box. Then it may feel like living in a box, but can we do more? We can just take the same building, put a little bit of paint on it, and it looks already far better. But if you now saved so much money, maybe we can get an artist involved, and maybe we can get our surface look pretty awesome. And have a really good thermal envelope. So let us get function right and then make it look pretty. That's what we have to do. So working with surfaces can be materials, can be like different stones, can be a combination out of timber or stone, or it could be shading devices or balconies and garages that are added to the outside, and then it takes the boxy look away. So let us work with surfaces for our children, for our planet. Let us do that. Conclusions. The biggest one of investment for most of our clients is our building. It's the biggest one of investment, and it's the biggest ongoing cost for our mortgage and for our running costs. This is the reason that we really need to think of the budget, of the value of the investment. If you're looking at the bigger picture, we know from 2007, the next report is coming out in 2 months regarding this. Building offers the largest savings potential in all 3 categories. So it's the lowest hanging fruit out there right now, building passive houses compared to anything else out there. This is the reason why we really need to go and build a highly performing building envelope, not just because we want to build passive houses, but because of the future that we want to give. If this was too quick and you want to get more details, please read the article in Build It magazine, or join me on the next webinar on the 13th of April. Let me share the link with you guys. Yeah. So what is the right question? The question is not, is passive house economical, or is passive house creating a return of investment? No, that is not the question. The question is, can we afford not to? Can we stay energy dependent on a nation, on leaders that don't have our values, that don't stand for human rights, for human dignity? Can we keep destroying the planet and let our children figure it out? Because we are not willing to take the risk, because we don't have the courage to stand up for a humanitarian future for us humans, for our biodiversity, for our appliance. The question is, can we afford not to? Thank you.
Fantastic, Daniel. I think we can all just unmute for a second here. We'll make sure we mute in a second, but bravo. Let's give him a big clap. Yeah. Woo-hoo! Love it. Great stuff. All right, Daniel, have a sip of water or your beverage of choice. Zach, over to you.
All right, thank you. So I want to take a moment to thank the fine organizations that make everything happen for us here at the Passive House Accelerator. We wouldn't be able to do events like tonight's without the support of these groups. So thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair all-in-one HVAC and dehumidification units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stokecorp, and Zola Windows. Thank you too to our champion sponsors, Icon Windows and Doors, Proseco, and SIGA. And thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you too to our patron sponsors, Aero Aggregates, Aero Barrier, Brennan, Brooklyn Solar Works, Euroline Windows, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Owens Corning, RDH Building Science, Sanderson Sustainable Design, and US Engineered Wood, T-Stud. Thank you, sponsors.
Excellent, Zach. Thank you for the sponsors. All right, Daniel, we got some questions. We're going to dive into it. I think the first one was pretty much answered, but we're going to give Jeff an opportunity to ask it again. Jeff, over to you, my friend.
Hey, guys. Sorry. No, really, what I'm looking for is conditions. What exactly are you quoting in this square meter or square foot pricing? You know, are you quoting systems that have to do with it? Are you quoting septic? Is it just inside the walls? You know, are we talking about excavation on pad? I mean, you know, what are we talking about included into this number? Because, you know, as a really picky ass estimator, that can be a big issue, right? That's me anyway.
Yeah. So first of all, one of the ones that is normally the biggest item for people is the windows. Yeah, people say, my windows cost $100,000. Yeah, so I normally spend $15,000 on windows. Now it's $100,000. This is not additional passive house costs. This is the timber aluminum clad windows with hidden hinges, with all the bells and whistles imported from Europe. Yeah,
right,
so,
but that's not code minimum. So when you, I'm not sure about Australia. So, but I know in New York, if you're talking about code minimum windows versus passive house windows, you're talking twice the cost. You know,
definitely not, because this is an architectural decision. If you're going for a UPVC window,
well, you know, I agree with you there. I agree with them. So let's talk code minimum versus passive house, because that's really what you need to compare to. Because a builder is going to build code minimum because that's how he makes money. Okay. So unless the appraisers and the banks are saying, oh yeah, we think that's worth that much, then the builder's going to go, no, I'm not going to take a chance. So he's going to put in, you know, some Andersons or something really cheap because it's code minimum. And so code minimum
Jeff, what's your square meter rate for code minimum windows? What's your average rate for that?
You're spending maybe $250 a window for code minimum windows. So you know, you can spend that for a screen for a passive house window. But the point of it is that a passive house window of the same size is going to cost you roughly twice that amount. All right, so
not what I see.
You're going to spend $700 to $800 for a decent UPC passive house window of the same size. So the point of it is that, and understand too that passive house windows cost more to install. So there's more time involved, there's more materials involved, you know, there's more men involved. If they're heavier, it takes 2 to 3 men instead of 1 or 2. So, you know, you're talking about a very, very big difference in the cost of building. Now, I'm not talking about for a homeowner. I think a homeowner is going to make that decision based on how long they're going to be in the home. But a builder, the builders are the people that build most of the homes in this country. I'm not sure about anywhere else, but in this country, builder developers are the ones that build homes. Unless it is attractive for them, you are not going to roll this out at a large scale. And that's just a fact from the ground. Okay.
So Jeff, how much do you spend on glazing a whole house like 120 square meter, like I showed you there? It's 1,000.
Oh, I'm trying to think of what the window package is right now for the house we're building now is about 50 grand. Okay.
How much?
About $50,000. It's the house, the
as
window
passive house or as a conventional house?
It's a passive house.
Okay. So, and what windows are you putting in there?
I think we're using icons.
Yeah, I mean, what type of windows? Is it UPVC?
Oh, it's
in
a UPVC,
white?
yeah, UPVC clad passive house. You know, it's not a super fancy, expensive window. You know, it's a good, sufficient window. You know, it's a good window.
So, and what would be the cost if you would put in the normal building standard, how like the normal windows in the same finishes.
Cost of materials would be about 30 to 35% less for the same quality of window. It would not be a tilt turn. It would probably be something more like a casement or double hung or something like that, because you do not need tilt turns. All right. So the point of it is this, is that I agree with you. I'm trying to be devil's advocate here. From a builder's point of view, the people that move and shake, the people that built middle-class America, right?
So
They're the ones that are going to be the ones that decide,
Jeff,
right?
you're taking already a lot of time there, and let me finish that up a
I'll
little.
let you go. I'm sorry.
And I think we all get your point here. So the thing is, the windows are not costing, the windows in Australia, the windows in Australia are not costing us more. I mute you. Can I mute? Scott is, yeah, okay.
I muted him. Sorry, Daniel.
Perfect. Yeah. So the additional costs in Australia for windows is not existing any longer, because the aluminium, like the aluminium windows, like the aluminium windows that we're having right now, they're so poorly manufactured with such low standards and so much labor involved in manufacturing them, that we're having the same cost than the UPVC window manufacturer that is actually doing them on a machine. So there's not an additional cost. Where the additional cost comes for the windows is, like you said, the install. So I put in $450 per window as an install, as an additional cost in my calculations. So this is where it really comes in, because here in Australia, the way they install windows, they put them into the opening, they put a few screws in it. If you're lucky, they put builder's foam around it, if you're lucky, and then they hope it's watertight. Yeah, and that's obviously never working in a passive house. So obviously there is an additional cost, and it's the labor cost, not the material cost for us, at least in Australia. Then we have more material costs. So we're having an additional thermal insulation thickness that we have to put in. And the thermal insulation itself didn't go up that much. The timber frame went up so much. Yeah, the timber frame itself went from $4 a linear meter up to, like, the highest was nearly $10 a linear meter. Yeah, so, but because of the way that we're using cheap thermal insulation in Australia, when we're using a timber frame, we still have to add a 90mm additional timber frame in there, and then putting our fiberglass in between the studs. So that means I have to add that stud as well in. With what was it, nearly $7, I think, $7.60. I think that was my linear meterage that I had to put in, plus the fiber insulation and additional labor for that. But the additional labor is not so much when then we have in the rest of the building, because we're already doing it. It's just adding on my, say, if it's a 90mm stud, it's now a 180mm stud. So my cut is a little bit longer. The weight is a little bit higher with moving it around and that things, but at the end, it's not such a additional labor expense. We're just having bigger components and putting more insulation in. Yeah, so the labor is not going up that much. And then one big one for us here in Sydney is we normally don't have to put thermal insulation underneath the slab. I actually said we put a XPS underneath the slab for this example, or even if you don't have to do it for passive houses in Sydney or Perth. And that insulation, that XPS, that was one of the bigger components. However, the 1/3 of the cost was upfront, like 1/3 of the components is the passive house designer, the thermal bridge analysis, the blow door testing, and the certification. That's 1/3 of the additional costs. And this is exactly where we should spend the money, on the designing, on thinking it through, and having everything ready before we even come to site.
Nice job, Daniel. That's a great point. Let's give him a round of applause there, that we're valuing eraser marks as opposed to time on site. I know those are some difficult questions to go through as far as costs from, you know, the other side of the world. So let's keep it moving and get some get another question in here.
We're heading over to Melvin. Melvin, you ready?
Sure. I guess almost on a similar point to Jeff, but rather being very specific, I'll be a lot broader. So, I mean, like you showed the like 5 to 20 or 1%. Like that's kind of similar to what we see in Vancouver. It's about like 1 to 8%. But then it's a bit different. Like Jeff mentioned that it's a lot more developers. So the question is, what is your cost pitch to developers and mortgage providers who are less concerned about operating costs and more concerned about capital costs? And I noticed that in Australia, you have a 0.5 or 0.2% reduction in the mortgage rate, but we don't have that here in Canada yet.
I'm pretty sure you have it in Canada. It's more common in US and Canada than actually in Australia. It's really new here. The reason is that they sell it as a green discount, but the reality is it's not a green discount. It's the risk reduction that they're having. That's what is reflected in that discount. The reality is, and that's proven, I think the study came from the US, I think a decade ago, that house owners that building a high performing building are more likely to pay the loan back than people that are building the stock standard house. And that risk reduction is actually causing that reduction in loan. Yeah, so it's not necessarily actually like they're selling it as a green discount and that they're doing something for the environment, but in reality, they're not having a lower profit on it because the risk is lower, and that's the reason they can give the discount. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's as well in Canada. The bank, yeah, there is a bank in Canada that I'm pretty sure has it.
Yeah, because I remember, I'm not sure who else was in that presentation, but Van City mentioned that they didn't have anything and they're one of the more greener banks. But I think the bigger question is cost pitch to developers, because they're the ones who make the bigger decision.
So the problem, I would say, like development for renting makes already sense. So if you're developing your own houses and you keep the stock and you're not selling it on, I think that is already really a return of investment, because people stay in that apartments because they've never experienced it before. You're just taking away their what's it called, domestic fuel costs. You cover them in the rent and say conditioning is covered. Domestic hot water and conditioning is covered in the rent. And by that, you're far more attractive to the market. And people are not fluctuating so often. So you're not having so many empty time in the apartments. So for that, I think it's already there. We see that a lot.
Sorry, it's not about renters, it's more about buyers.
So on the buyer's market, on building and selling, because there we really have to look at, is the buyer willing to spend another $48,000? Like in that example that I brought, $48,000 upfront, and say, yeah, I know it's a passive house. I'm willing to spend that money on it. And I think we are not there yet without the incentive of the government. Yeah, soon we have that incentive of 0.3% plus the 0.2 that comes from the bank. Then I think we see it because like there's obviously a value difference on the market. Is not 48,000, it might be 30,000. So it might be 30,000. They might be willing to spend another 18,000, maybe 20, 25,000, but they're most likely not willing to spend $48,000 additional. Make sense? So in that building and selling, I don't see it yet to be a return of investment if we only looking at a return of investment. Yeah, so I mean, if it's a developer without conscience and is not thinking about the impact of his work, then he's not able to get a return of investment. But if he's going into the green market and he wants to make a difference, he is not only there to make more money, and is conscious about his decisions, then I would say it could work already with a smaller return of investment.
Melvin, I put a resource in the chat. It's the New York Passive House Developers Guide, and it does help with some of the sales pitches to developers. They had a good conference many years ago, and they helped make that. And in New York City here, we have a really good push for developers developing passive house and multifamily. And a lot of it comes from incentives, political incentives. They're not true like federal or national kind of like programs, but the local developers are getting greater opportunity to these properties through certain RFPs. So in Vancouver, you guys are doing a great job as well. I don't think anyone truly has it fully worked out, but when we do get that model, I think we'll get there, and Passive House is kind of the way where we should all be pushing, just for comfort and for the future. So
if you're speaking apartment blocks, it makes already today sense. Like I spoke of the single, like the freestanding single house. There it's a bit more difficult to get that working. On apartments, it's a total no-brainer. It's a total no-brainer. Think about what's the facade of your building. It's windows. And like I said before, windows are not necessarily more expensive nowadays. The labor is higher because of the install, and we have to make sure everything is tight, and we don't having the water problems that are causing the biggest costs for us in developments, that we have to come back and fix things. But if you're installing it straight away properly, it's not a problem. The biggest rental developer in Frankfurt, Germany, he is only building passive houses because it's economical. And he's upgrading all his building stock to passive house right now because of the financial situation. It makes financial sense. It took that guy, I think, 6 years to convince them to build the first one. And then they saw how it works. And now they're going crazy. They're having over 40% of the rental market in Frankfurt is owned by that company. Might be good to know.
Daniel, I'll ask you one thing as I wrap the first hour up. Can you throw up the last slide of your presentation? Because Zoe and maybe a few others wanted to just look at the links for those articles that are upcoming, because they want to make sure that they see them, read them, share them, and all the fun stuff. So I'll let you do that. Well, folks, we have wrapped up the 5th Wednesday Passive House Accelerator Live. We're going to dive into the after hour because we still got some more questions and need to continue on things. And I think Zoe wanted the slide just before this. If not, Zoe, let me know what you're looking for. I'll leave this one up. This one's a good transition too. Yeah, let's stick to that one. So, folks, thank you for joining us. It is great to see everybody again. We're going to keep diving into some of the stuff. And I think we can all take away that it costs money to build. It costs money to build Passive House. And the info that Daniel presented to us tonight creates a lot of discussion, a lot of communication, a lot of language that we can use when we're discussing this with individuals. And I love how we look at things. I know as a builder now here in Vancouver, I'm trying to build for the same price of a regular build, mainly because I love just the discussions and the challenge of it all. But at the end of the day, the value of what we're doing to the homeowners supersedes a lot of things. I know the cost is the big thing, but we can get there. And Daniel presented numbers 5 different ways from Sunday to get us there. And I know we've got some more questions. So if you need to leave us, you've got homework. Be back next week. We've got a great show with some developers. I know we had those presenters here today spying on Daniel. And so we will tease them about the cost of their build. And I know the big theme tonight, I know Harvey couldn't join us tonight. Harvey would have loved this because it's all about pennies and groceries and how we spend our money on our Passive House projects. Daniel did a great job. We see you next week. Let's continue on in the after hour. Daniel, we have, and let me just make sure that this person is here. Let me pull up that list. We went from Melvin and we have Jessica. Let me just make sure that Jessica is still.
Sean,
Yes.
I want to let you look through the list real quick, and let's give a big wave to Zach because he's got to take care of everything. So thank you, Zach. I have an interesting question, Daniel. You did a lot of comparisons. So when we get a cup of coffee, is that natural coffee in an insulated mug, or are we dealing with an uninsulated inferior mug that's just going to get cold and we're going to end up replacing and wasting it?
So if you're using your one-way cup without insulation, you need to have anyway 2 cups. So it's not $4.50, it's actually $9. So you're already having a return of investment. So guys, the thing is, the reason I put that together is I want to start this discussion about the costs, because nobody wants to touch it, because everybody is worried about all that blast against people. Yeah, and that's the reason I want to show it. And I'm looking at the pricing I'm having here in Sydney. Obviously, I don't know the market in New York or in Vancouver or somewhere. I'm looking at the pricing here in Sydney, and I got this whole bloody house, and I've not expected that when I got the quote sent out for quoting, for less than $10,000. Yeah, obviously, as well as Sydney climate is a bit milder than a Vancouver climate or a Toronto climate, especially. But what I see is, okay, now I'm going a bit farther out of the whole thing. So what I see, we're building better, obviously, in a colder climate. Yeah, because if we wouldn't be around any longer. Simple as that. We would die over the winter time. So we're building already to a better quality, because otherwise we die during the winter time. That's the reason why we have to plan in the northern atmosphere, or like in the closer to the poles more in our life, because we know in the summer we can get our food and we can produce everything, and then in the winter we have to survive in a way. So so we're building better in different areas, but the difference seems to me, and that's now a hypothesis that I haven't proven yet. I think the difference of performance from what we build right now to what we need to build as a passive house is 10 centimeters. So it's 4 inches. So I'm saying the additional insulation that we need to come from building code, more or less, to passive house, if you're building compact, not if you're creating crazy shapes, is just 4 inches. And this is the reason why I believe that this $400 per square meter in an industrial country like Australia or Europe or the States should be actually pretty similar. Because of that, I looked at somebody else that priced his whole project as a normal house and then as a passive house. I think it's passivehousedesigner.com.au. David something. He priced his projects as a solar passive house and then priced it as a passive house. The cost difference came to $480 a square meter. So I'm at $380 a square meter. He is at $480 a square meter. The difference between his quote and my quote is I'm using white UPVC windows. He uses wooden aluminum clad. I personally would use wooden aluminum clad because I'm not designing a house that is too big for my budget. Yeah, for me personally, I would use a wooden aluminum clad because that's the most sustainable product that we can use. And as well as a carpenter, I couldn't do it with my conscience, yeah, going for a UPVC on my personal house. But if you have clients where the budget is that limited that they can't afford more than UPVC, rather go for the UPVC, because what I see a lot is everything or nothing. This is what I see a lot in the movement, that everybody says, I want everything, so you can't give me the Lamborghini or the Bentley, so I rather go back to my my runners, because that's the quality difference, yeah, using your runners or having a Bentley. And the Bentley is not necessarily what we need. We don't need all that finishes. We don't need that high quality of finishes to come to passive house. Like a UPVC window that is a white, that is big in size. So windows, best advice for windows, few in numbers, big in size. Few in numbers, big in size. Because the frame is the most expensive part, the install is the most expensive part, and the glazing is what we want. We don't want frame. We want glazing. So this is what we really want. We want to have a few windows that are big, and then maybe get a multi-function out of it. Let it be a door from inside to the outside. Okay, I'm going.
Love the rant, buddy. We love it.
Yeah.
You know what? This is why we showed up. Is your passion is so intoxicating. It is fantastic. And honestly, we could just do you every week, every show, every week. It'd be fantastic. Hey, Jessica did pop in. Jessica, over to you.
Okay, thanks so much. And I just wanted to say, Daniel, thank you so much for your presentation. It's been having this numbers information. It really comes back to so many of the conversations I have around Passive House with different residents. I work for a local government, and the people who are super passionate and committed to having Passive House, Standard House. These questions always come up around costs, and there's a lot of angst around it. So the more data we have on what the actual cost differences are at that early stage is so valuable, and being able to speak to it in a way that connects with emotions and people's other values, and that's so important. You do that very skillfully, so thank you. What my question was numbers around resale. So I often hear the argument of build a passive house or a really energy efficient house and or lead whatever, maybe you'll have higher resale out of it, but I don't see a lot of numbers to really back that up. I haven't done a lot of research into it, but I was curious if you know of any resources that provide concrete numbers on maybe more value in resale that would help people feel more comfortable with that really high upfront or higher upfront costs that can make some people nervous and long ROI.
Like I don't have studies or something on it. What I would say, you get more value from, like you get a higher sales value from it, 100%. But is that a higher sales value higher than my investment, my additional investment? I don't think so. I think it's still the other way around. I think the public is still not willing to spend this money because they don't, like they say, $50,000 more. I spend $2,000 on heating and cooling. This is 25 years until that comes back to me. So they're not stupid. Like they look at it and it makes no sense when you do that simple calculations. And and this is the reason, like, we need you guys, we need the government, we need our people, we need the government at the end to give these incentives to make it attractive, because this loan period is the only time where we're having this negative time. After the loan period, we are winning. Imagine if in the next 50 years, every household has another $250,000 to spend. Every single household. This is massive. So it makes total sense in the long run, but for the one that is trying to flip the houses in a 5-year, 7-year cycle, or in the US, I think you're changing houses every 18 months. What's crazy? Then it's difficult to get a return of investment. And this is, I think, the reason why we need these incentives from the top that says, if you're doing this, then you're getting a discount on your loan. The problem with the discount alone is, and I showed that in a positive way, but it could be seen as well as a negative way. So if you're building the high-end houses for like $15,000 a square meter, your return of investment is massive. Yeah, so the rich people are winning with this approach. But on the other hand, if I'm building the cheapest of the cheapest, I want them to build better. I want them to build better. And if these mansions are at the end built for centuries and not just for 30 years, then we're as well winning as a society, even if they were winning more on paper. But I think overall, we are still winning.
Every time you answer a question, honestly, we can just unmute and just keep clapping, because just Daniel, just fantastic answers. Jessica, great question. Thanks for popping in. Sorry, I just was listening to your answer, so I didn't. Oops, sorry. I didn't queue up Sven. Let me just make sure Sven is still here. Yep, Sven, if you're available, go ahead and ask your question. Otherwise, I will pull it up.
Thank you. No, that's right. I'll quickly spit it out. Daniel, thanks for your time and all your hard work. Your passion is infectious, and really appreciate it. I see a lot of what you comment on in the Facebook forums too, and every time you're giving so much knowledge. So thank you for that. Your costings are probably Sydney biased. Would you agree with that? And the Sydney climate, therefore?
Yeah, yes and no. Like I said, I believe that it's probably, but I haven't proven that hypothesis yet. I believe that it's always that 10 centimeters, that 4 inches. Yeah, that we need to add to make it passive house. I think it's always that thickness of insulation that we need to add. As well in Australia, air tightness is not really a thing. So we have to put the whole membrane in there, the whole taping, the whole labor. So that's a big one. In other countries, it's more common already.
Yeah. Would you agree that the 2,500 a square meter is sort of bargain basement, entry level,
yes,
can't do it any cheaper kind of thing? I mean, we haven't heard of construction rates in any custom build market that we work in down in Victoria in Southern Australia. We get a normal custom home built for that. It's, you know, 3 square meter and above.
I don't know if I can. I'm not mentioning the name, but I know a designer in Victoria that has 2 houses in the moment on their books, and they're building it right now in this current market for $2,515 and $2,600 in the current market.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier it was Simone. Yeah,
and it's SIPs and timber frame. One is SIPs, the other one is stick built.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. I don't want to take up too much time. It's running over. Thank you.
Yeah.
All good, Sven. We're kind of in the after hour where anything can happen. Everything kind of goes out the window rules wise, and we just get right to the nitty gritty. And again, Daniel's got good stuff. What a lively chat today. Holy moly. There's been some good discussion, some fiery points. And again,
can I tell a quick story?
Yes. Story time. Go ahead.
So the first passive house I worked on with Backstingui, they bid that project out. It was a retrofit of a townhouse in Manhattan. And when they bid that project out first, it was a regular standard New York retrofit, no insulation, no ventilation system. It had a boiler and, 13 tons of cooling on the roof. So the 13 tons of cooling on a 5-story building is insane, but that was the standard practice to make those leaky buildings at 10 air changes per hour comfortable. That's what they knew how to do. So they had one budget for that, and then they rebid it as a passive house. And when they redesigned and rebid it, it being the first one, they were able to get that mechanical cost, that mechanical load of 13 tons down to 4 tons. And the 4 tons was oversized by at least 1 or 2 tons. They could have gotten a lot more. But at the same time, they didn't have to put in a boiler as well. So they saved on the mechanical cost and the cooling, and they invested it in the enclosure, the windows, the doors, the ventilation system. So they saw an improvement right there. Just on blow a door numbers alone, we struggled to get there, but we eventually got there. And that project, in a very high-end neighborhood, was up for sale for quite a bit more money. And it has value in that our challenge is that we don't have enough comps, right? So real estate's all about comps. So people don't build passive house and be like, I'm going to sell this, like they live in them, they store them for a while. So I saw somebody mention Pearl certification. Pearl certification is a great endeavor to value the work that we value. But even Pearl certification doesn't really go to the extent that Passive House does, because Pearl certification is, values high performance qualities, but we really have the metrics. We know that it's the top of the market. We know it's going to perform internationally. So somehow if we can convince the financial world, the lenders, to value Passive House, I think it'll turn things. Early on in my career, I was 21 years old and I became a HERS rater. I took a class. I was like, I know how to run a blow a door. And I thought I was going to make tons of money, right? I was like, I made meetings with builders, and I got kicked out of more construction trailers than I can name, because I would just tell, oh, you have to build an Energy Star labeled home. And they kicked me out because why would I do that? Why would I build a more expensive home just to get $2,500 as a rebate? And I was like, oh, but there's an energy efficient mortgage that somebody can get. And when you really looked it down, that the energy efficient mortgage, they weren't easy to get. You had to go through Fannie Mae or Mac. So we really need the financial institutions to value our properties a little better, and maybe sweeten the pot a little. And then along with that, maybe some incentives from local governments or some zoning things. But Daniel, I agree with your 4 inches as well, very much, because it costs the same amount of money to install a 1/2 inch of foam on the outside of a building or 1 inch of rock wool, as opposed to it does 6 inches or 4 inches. The screws might be a little longer, but it costs the same amount of money labor-wise to install it. So that's my story. And thank you, Daniel, very much. And I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. I want to add to the project as well. Like, I'm involved in a project right now, and the designer did an amazing job with designing it already. It's a science lab. And just by modeling it with PHPP, I was able to save him $100,000. And I said, you don't need this from a thermal perspective. You don't need this. Like the shades were not needed. The thermal insulation underneath the slab wasn't needed. And he could take that out. But he then made that decision as a designer. I said, we want to have the shading elements on because of an architectural requirement, like architectural feature. But theoretically, he could save $100,000 and get the same performance of, like, gets the passive house performance. And I think this is the massive one that is often overlooked. By doing the work, by going in and modeling it and checking, do I need 6 inches, or do I need 8 inches, or do I need 5 inches? With this, I can, like, for me, PHPP is an economical optimization tool. Like PHPP is for optimization of my model, and there's nothing like it out there, because every other modeling software needs minutes, if not half an hour, to get a result. PHPP is instant feedback, instant feedback, instant feedback. Product 1, product 2, product 3, product 4, done in 5 minutes. This is the economical optimum. This is the reason why PHPP is so ideal, because it has only an accuracy of 95% to 3D modeling. However, the feedback loop that we're having is making it super economical. Yeah, good.
Sorry, Daniel, I was trying to look up something and I couldn't find it fast enough because too slow. Great info, great questions. And Kevin, you just keep telling the stories. It's great stuff. In the queue, we had Mary James, and Mary's was more of an open question. So hold on, Mary, we'll come to you in a second. Again, there was lots of chatter, so I think I've got all the questions, but does anybody have one? If you do, please put up your hand and I will call upon you.
Like that,
okay.
That hand, I guess.
Yes, that lovely hand. I think, Daniel, we've gotten through a lot of questions. Mark, you got a hand up?
Hey, Daniel, so what do you think we can do to make the biggest influence, not in the consumers, not in the architects, not in the designers, and not in the people on this call, but in the tradespeople, the suppliers, and the contractors itself? What do you think we could do to kind of sweeten the barbecue and get more burgers flipping?
I think a lot of our tradies are family men. Yeah, they're having family, they're having kids. And speaking with them on the emotional level and telling them what that means. Yeah, that we're running into a climate disaster right now. And we need to take massive action. And you can do that with your job. You can be standing in front of your children and say, I did what I could do. And not having this, Daddy, why did you drive a petrol car? Daddy, why did you build this type of houses? You know better, that you don't have this blame situation in a later station. You can say, I've done everything I could in my lifetime to provide you a future and a planet that you can live on.
Bravo, Daniel. I got to chill. I mean, I'm a builder and I got 2 daughters, and this is why I go build every day, is just to do that. And so I agree with it 100%.
Thank you.
Just letting that answer, just make sure we all heard it and let it sink in, because.
Yeah, and in 2 months, we get the IPCC report, and it tells us the lowest hanging fruit is passive house. Yep. There's nothing more cost effective than building passive houses. Yeah, not in the food industry, not in the manufacturing, not in the transportation. It's our houses where that lowest hanging fruit is. And us, we can make the difference. Yeah.
So that report is essentially the grand slam, the slam dunk, the hole in one. Yeah. Beautiful. Can't wait for that.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I'm waiting for that. Yeah, like I'm preparing for that with these economical discussions that we're having for the next 1.5 months. We do a lot of them, and then we bring that on top. Because 2007, in that IPCC report, they were doing that work. Now they're repeating that work. And that is in that section 3 that is coming out now. Yeah.
Well, Daniel, just on that note too, the Canadian Home Builders Association 2017 homeowners, and again, single family, the top 10 most things they wanted in their home was a walk-in closet. Well, I can say that in 5 years, finally, the #1 item that people wanted was overall energy efficient home. So all the work we're doing is moving the dial. And the best part too is #2 was energy efficient appliances. #3 was high efficiency windows, and walk-in closets got bumped down to #4. So you know what? All the preaching, yelling, soapboxing, friendly conversations with all of our people, we're doing it. We're moving the dial. I know it might be slow, but again, we're accelerating more than we think we are. And we just got to keep telling our friends, focus on the 10X, and we will get there. And if we just keep taking all the knowledge that we've shown over 2 years of the accelerator events here, it's been fantastic. And again, the culture and the community that we have about collaboration and sharing, we got pretty passionate about costs. We all know at the end of the day, costs go out the window. It's the value of what we can provide to the world and to humans in the shelter that we can make better. And so just keep on preaching, Daniel. And again, for all those that get to take one of your courses, they are lucky. So thank you for being an influencer. Thank you for just dialing this down in such a language that we can all take away. And I'm pretty sure we could probably say, and I'm going to put money on this, Mark will bet me, is I'm pretty sure that within the next month, you will be the most viewed YouTube video on the Passive Accelerator channel, because today was juicy info and everyone's going to want to rewatch this and dive into it so we can use some of the tips you said. So bravo.
I think I nominate you, Daniel, to be the fifth Wednesday. Every fifth Wednesday we'll do this, and then Lloyd has to back you on the Tuesday prior for the double feature. So I want to highlight real quick, Melvin. Thank you for that comment. Following Sean's list of 3s, it's always surprising, Melvin, what people bring up or what they don't bring up. And let's just take the victories of less walk-in closets, maybe because it's chewing into their square footage. So go ahead, Sean.
And sorry, Melvin, #5 was ERVs and HRVs, because of course people don't know what they are. We need to replace it with fresh air machine, and then it'll drive up the number. But the fact that finally walk-in closets had a 10-year #1 in that first position to be dropped to #4 means we're doing our part. We just got to keep at it, And again, in BC, Passive House will be code in 2032. I wish it was yesterday, and a lot of us here are moving it, so we know it's coming. All of us used to make sure that it's code across the world, and we're working on it. I mean, the fact that the UN has it in their sustainable development plans, we're doing our part. We just need to keep doing it. And when you hit resistance, move on. There are other people that will listen to us and see the value. Don't waste your time with people that aren't taking your little teacup worth of, or when you give them the coffee of, hey, here's a little bit of Passive House, and they say, no, thank you. Okay, I'll move on. Because once you give the coffee, then they're going to want the jug, and then you get the fire hose, and they're in, and you move on to the next one, and we just keep doing it. It's just a question of using the language that Daniel presented and the language you've learned that makes you feel good about what you do and what you're passionate, and we can just keep scaling this. So bravo for everyone showing up to listen to Daniel. Daniel, bravo to you. And I think, everybody, we could probably wrap up early unless there's any. Oh,
I got a question.
Yeah. Sorry, Bruce, go ahead. I see Robert, so we got a couple
so
of questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, not so much a question as a comment. Daniel, fantastic presentation. I echo all of Sean's comments. But I think we want to keep in front of the low-hanging fruit all of the existing buildings that need the retrofits and the attention of us, the people that know how to do the proper way of remodeling these. I'm dead certain that there are going to be contractors who are going to become developers, and we used to use the term flipping houses. I think it's going to be flipping with a PH, flipping houses and really making a stab at the affordable housing market, plus increasing the quantity of good quality.
So yeah, Bruce, 100%. The existing market, like the existing building stock, is something we have to address as well. On the other hand, we have to make sure that we're not adding more problems to the market with the new builds. So, and that is an easy one from a regulation point of view. We could just say passive house and happy days. It's not working like that, but theoretically it would be possible. I think the thing is, because of passive house is not necessarily economical in retrofits and in flipping and things like this yet, the government needs to upgrade all their stock, all their public housing to passive house, because this is public money to train the building industry on it. It's a little bit late. I wanted that 10 years ago. My thesis was on how to make that economical, but like what I wanted to write, we need to get all, like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, I'm not sure about Perth, we all signed the agreement that we are facing a climate disaster. So act and be an example with your buildings. Yeah, and the mayor of Sydney said 3 weeks ago, every new build needs to be built like passive house. That's what she said on the Icebox Challenge. That was her words. And she should be with an example and say, we're putting money into modernizing our public buildings so that people can experience passive houses in schools, in libraries, in public buildings where we have that already, and then they're choosing it as well. Because like, if you don't know it, if you give somebody of the Stone Age a mobile phone, they wouldn't know what to do with it. You first need to experience the benefits. So we really need to get that as well on the public level, big time. That's like, I tried to do that 10 years ago back in Germany, but it's a global issue. Yeah, and the public can afford it. Maybe the individual can't yet, but the public can afford it. So let us do the public buildings. Yeah, we need it.
All right, Daniel, great evening, great presentation. I keep forgetting that it's Thursday in your world and we're still on Wednesday. So I wish you an excellent Thursday, and all of us, let's make sure when we talk to people, we talk about how to spend their coffee money in a more effective way. And as Mark alluded to, maybe it should be in a nicely insulated cup to make sure your coffee can stay warm for the rest of the day.